how do you think that, looking at it through the lens of type, like how can I use something like this and get the most out of it with a type lens? Like what are some ways that I could ask it questions that would really help me in understanding who I am, my personality type, and then also maybe even optimizing it for anybody who's, into growth and development, recognizing that it's not going to have all the answers and recognizing that you're still going to have to personalize it to yourself. What are the kinds of questions that a person could ask it in order to maybe get the most out of it in type related content?
And by the way, I just want to ask a clarifying question. Is that how you would recommend us thinking about it? Is that we're asking this questions?
Right.
Or is it more a conversational style that I should be approaching it? Like what kind of mentality should I show up to the tool itself with in the first place?
I would say that whatever approach leads you to actually using it.
Okay.
Right? Because that's the end all be all is actually figuring out some way to find your own intrinsic interests and translating that into actually using the tool. That is the highest leverage thing you could focus on. And given that your audience is going to be interested in type, self-development, self-awareness, all of that kind of stuff, you guys already have an intrinsic interest in that kind of stuff. So let's leverage that interest that you already have.
Because I was noticing downstairs when we were playing with this earlier, you were like politely, asked like, can you please answer this and like question? I'm like, tell me this thing. I'm like giving commands basically. I don't know if it qualitatively changes the nature of the tool. Or is it pretty much...
Interestingly, I bet it does actually change the output, but it's not because its, feelings are offended or anything like that, because obviously it doesn't have any. But I mean, I've always just viewed it humorously as like, man, my 3-year-old extroverted feeling just can't not say, oh, wow, that was a really great response. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
to follow up, blah, blah, blah. I kind of wish that I could have the TE thing. Maybe it'll train me to do that, just to be a bit more direct. Regardless, though, I do think that a good... way to potentially use this if you are interested in type is, well, you could attack this from a couple different lenses. One of them could be shoring up the weaknesses of your inferior function, perhaps, right? So fellow INTPs, maybe a lot of that extroverted feeling stuff is, kind of going over your head. Why am I arguing with my girlfriend? Like, what did I say this time? What can I say to just make her feel better? Or my girlfriend's birthday is coming up. What do I do? Right?
These are all your most recent...
something like, I don't know.
Hypothetically.
Don't check my history. And so, yeah, you can get really good advice that is specifically tailored to you, because you can say, I'm an INTP, yada, yada, yada. I have whatever type girlfriend, and I really don't know what to do for her birthday, and I want to just make her feel special, but I really don't know what to do about this kind of stuff. Like, what can I say? What can I do? All that kind of stuff, right? So it can give you... Here's a personalized version for your particular girlfriend, for your particular, and the more details you can give it, the more personalized the advice can get. And really know that you're speaking to effectively a human. Like, don't write this as if you're speaking to a machine. You're just speaking to a human. Alternatively, you can use it to bolster the strengths of your front seat functions, right? So, in that INTJ example, if you have your vision for the business and whatnot, and you just have now access to an insane amount of, resource in terms of being able to actually manifest your vision, well, that's amazing. So you can bolster your strengths or mitigate your weaknesses, I would say, in terms of the questions that you'd want to ask the chatbot. And there should be an intrinsic interest in people for, giving that a shot.
Like Joel recently, I don't want to give it away, Joel, just in case you want to turn it into $1 billion idea, truly.
Oh.
Is it okay if I say the thing?
I don't know what you're going to say, so let's do it.
I was talking about the beer idea.
Oh, that, yes.
So Joel recently ran into something that he like immediately saw. It was like, this is $1 billion idea. It was...
Oh, a million. I don't know. Maybe billion.
Well, you said billion, but...
Hyperbolically, yes.
Hyperbolically. And we were talking about... Well, I'm not going to describe the whole thing because it's way too much, but it was effectively like something that I think could take off very quickly. And you said, well, what you could do is you could plug all the particulars into ChatGPT and say, give me a business model that would work. And ChatGPT will spit out an entire business model and the sequence of events that you would need to do in order to build a business around this idea. And I was like, well, that's pretty slick. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you could say, okay, so for step 1, you had me doing this. Let's dive into that. So what steps do I legitimately, tell me what to do. What is the first thing that I do here? How do I make these partnerships? How do I actually create the email where I create these partnerships with different venues or whatever it might be for your specific business idea? Literally every single thing you could possibly imagine asking yourself or another human, you can ask it, and it's already an expert at marketing and copy, and it can write the copy for your website, and it can write the articles on your website. Like, it can basically do everything. You just have to ask it the question. So yeah, for business creation, it's absolutely amazing because there's so many steps to creating businesses. And you can get tripped up because, oh, wow, I didn't know about tax laws and all of this kind of stuff. And so you can always ask it, what am I missing? Here's an idea that I have. Like, what are the gotchas here? What are the things that I don't know that I don't even know to ask you, right? So just constantly asking it for what to ask it, or where am I missing something, or this is what I think is a good idea. Is it, do you agree with me? Or do you think, like, what are counter arguments? And the cool thing is, and I don't know if everybody feels this way, but I personally love speaking to a machine when asking these questions because my ego doesn't get involved at all. I've done a lot of work to make sure that I can change my opinion when presented with new information and whatnot, but there's always that little bit of, oh, I wish I was right, at the beginning. But with AI, I do think that there's going to be less resistance to that, right? If you have uncertainty in your inferior function and it leads you to want to be resolute with your statements, and or you're too malleable with your statements, you can kind of overcome those inherent weaknesses by not having the social component associated with getting that information. You don't need to feel like you're in a deference role if you want to be the domineering type of person. You're like, okay, I'm actually like the boss who owns absolutely everything, but I don't really get these relationship things. And so you can ask it questions that you might be embarrassed about asking otherwise. And so you can shore up your weaknesses without having to go through the difficulty of seeing other people do it. So there's ways you can get around your ego getting in the way of developing yourself that I really like.
Yeah, I was just thinking, because we mostly are using thinker types to illustrate how a person could use the tool or the instruments. It's like, help me with the business strategy, help me understand interpersonal dynamics, right? Like, help me with my weaknesses. But I was thinking, how would a feeler use this? And I thought, I do a lot of recommending steel manning. You even used the term before. Steel manning we did an entire podcast on it. It's the opposite of straw manning. Straw manning an argument is when your opponent or somebody you're arguing with presents an argument and you take the weakest part of their argument as a representation of the whole and then just only attack that. And steel manning goes the opposite direction. You're actually looking for the strongest part of their argument. But it takes a long time to really develop that with any sort of sophistication. Like, it's hard to steel man somebody else's argument. So I would imagine, I'm probably going to use it this way. Anything that is the opposite view of what I already believe, I'm going to ask ChatGPT to steel man the opposite side. I want to know what the strongest arguments are because sometimes I'm blind to them. And so you could use it to steel man things. You could use it to help you create plans, right? Strategies. Hey, I've got these tasks to do today. What, and these are the confines, right? This is how much time I have. This is like the order of importance and priority. What order, what should I be doing first, right? How do I clean my room? We mentioned, I was like, and it will tell you, it's like, well, start with blah, 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 blah. Basically anything that you are struggling to pull the trigger on and you have any sort of analysis paralysis, you can go in and go, hey, ChatGPT, I have analysis paralysis because I'm unsure of how to prioritize this thing, or I'm really having a hard time communicating with somebody in my family because they resolutely believe this political persuasion or this religious persuasion, and I actually believe this. So how would you recommend I think about it, right? Or what is the steel man of their argument so I can meet them halfway maybe? I can see this really helping a lot of different, even like you mentioned, interpersonal dynamics, not what do I get my girlfriend for birthday, although that was a fantastic one for those of us who have extroverted feeling lower in our stack or not good at gift giving. But, like how do I engage and interact with people in a way that makes me not come across as caustic? It gives a knowledge base, right? Like knowledge, not just data and information, but it gives advice and recommendations. And then when we take it, it's like just speeding up wisdom so fast. We now employ the knowledge it gives us, and now we have wisdom on the other side of how that went. So I can see it really, in one of a recent podcasts, I don't know how these will roll out, and I don't know what I say when, but I mentioned that my perspective of personal growth is that its purpose is to accelerate maturity. That's what it does. That's why personal growth is a good tool to have. It helps us become more mature much faster. And I feel like this tool helps speed up wisdom. It gets us to a point of employing strategies that maybe we were hesitant to do or were in analysis paralysis, and we can actually do them, and then we can get the learning from having done them. And so it's an acceleration of wisdom, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, basically allows you to iterate on almost anything faster. And so you can retrospect on a completed project rather than on the feelings associated with maybe it would go wrong and maybe it wouldn't, right? And because it removes that barrier of potential antagonism or having to, push down your ego or any of that kind of stuff. I love that thought actually that you brought up of people going and looking for the steel man of opposing arguments. And the cool thing is I'm assuming that, or I'm guessing that people will have less of a negative reaction when it gives them an answer that's opposing to their own, but they'll still have some. And then I encourage you, listeners, to, if you still feel like, oh, I don't like that answer, tell ChatGPT, by the way, I have this anger inside of me when that's mentioned. And what do you think that's associated with, right? Because like I think this and I feel really strongly about it. What do you think about that? Like you can basically ask it open-ended questions, and it can almost teach you how to engage with yourself in a little bit more of a self-aware way without feeling vulnerable. If that happens to be an issue for you, and a lot of people do find, for example, when you're first trying to develop your FI or TI, introverted thinking or introverted feeling in the opposite direction, it's kind of like a quote unquote healthy and unhealthy version of both of those functions, sort of almost act the opposite of the, healthy and unhealthy versions. And so, when I want to be right so badly. And then when you start developing your introverted thinking, it's like I want to be wrong so badly so that I can learn more, right? Mm-hmm. And then with introverted feeling, you're like, I want to validate the right for me to feel this way so bad, and I want everybody to go and tell me how validated I am. And then you get so chill after you incorporate more of a healthy mentality. It's like, well, this is my feeling and that's their feeling. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of like this openness to the experience for both people to have an authentic expression of their own feelings regarding something. And there's this open-mindedness to it. And so if a barrier to practicing that different manifestation of a healthier version of your cognitive function, if your ego's getting in the way, then potentially a dialogue with ChatGPT could be an onboarding experience. It's like exposure therapy to doing this over and over again. And then you can start doing it with people, and it's like, oh, wow. Now it's just amazing. So yeah, I like that. I hadn't thought of that immediately, but yeah, that's a great use for it.